In this video, we're going to have a look around Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS. Hello, I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. So hopefully by now you have installed SSMS on your computer and installed maybe SQL Server Developer Edition on your computer as well. If you haven't, then there will be a link to a video about this in the description and also at the end of this video. So once you've done this, you can now use SSMS. Now, first of all, you've got to connect to a server. So if you're connecting to a server on your machine, then you can use the server name dot or localhost, and that's one word. Alternatively, if somebody has given you the credentials for your SQL server, they'll have given you your server name and whether you connect using Windows authentication, so that's the same credentials that you use when logging into Windows, or whether you're using SQL Server authentication, in which case you will have a login and a password. I'm going to change this back to Windows authentication. If you are searching for a server, then you can click the drop down on the right hand side of the server name drop down box, go to Browse for More, expand the database engine to see local servers, and you can click on Network Servers and see any SQL Server instances in the network for your computer. So I'm going to cancel that and I'm going to connect to my local server by having the server name of dot and click Connect. So now I have logged in to the server. That doesn't necessarily mean that I've logged into all of the databases that are there. It depends on your permissions. So on the left hand side, we've got the Object Explorer. This is very important. If you don't have the Object Explorer, say you have accidentally pressed the X button, then you can get it back by going to View, Object Explorer, or pressing the function key F8. Now, SSMS, or SQL Server Management Studio, is there so you can write your queries. It's also there for database administration. So let's just have a look at the query writing to begin with. First of all, to create a new query, you can click on New Query, or you can use the Object Explorer to expand the Databases node, and then right and click on a particular database and go to New Query. So in this example, I'll just click on the New Query button in the toolbar. This opens up a New Query tab. Now, if you don't want this position of the query tab, you want it somewhere else, then you can detach it from the SSMS window by just dragging it. And this then opens it in its own window. So suppose I wanted it on the right hand side of the screen, you can do that. If you want it back with any other tabs, then you can drag it into the middle of the screen where we have got this central icon, and that then reattaches it to the rest of the program. You can have as many query windows open as you want, and you can close them by clicking on the X button, and you can pin them in by clicking at the Pin button. If you do that, it will be present always on the left-hand side of SSMS. Now, I'm logged into my server, but I'm not necessarily in the right database that I want. Currently, I'm in the YouTube database. You can see this in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. It says YouTube, and also the top left-hand corner. If you want to change the database you're in, then you can just click on the drop-down in the top left-hand corner and change which particular database you want to go to. So here I'm going to the AdventureWorks database. If I go to the AdventureWorks node in the Object Explorer and expand it, you'll see that there are things like database diagrams, tables, views, programming, and security. Let's open up the tables, and we can see there are a lot of tables there. Suppose I wanted to retrieve the contents of a table. Well, one quick way is to right and click on that table and go to Select Top 1000 Rows. So if I click that, this will generate this script. Now this script shows the select clause, the top 1000, which you can delete if you want to see all of the rows. At the moment, there are only 1000 rows shown. So if I delete the top 1000 and then press execute again, then it will show me, in this case, 19,614 rows. It also shows me each of the columns, and you can expand the table in the Object Explorer to see things like columns, keys, constraints, triggers, indexes, and statistics. Now we have all of the columns preceded by a comma. If there's one that you don't want, say address line 2, then you can either delete that line or you can comment it. So if you want to comment it, a quick way is to click on the comment icon in the toolbar, and that adds 2 hyphens. Now I say that's a quick way, it's not necessarily quick for one particular line, but if you wanted to do a range of lines, say I don't want from spatial location down to modified date, then I can highlight all 3 of those rows and click the comment. I can undo that at a later date by highlighting the rows and going to uncomment, and that will delete all 3 lines. Another way of looking at the data is in an editable form. If I right and click on the table, I can edit top 200 rows, and this shows me here, as you can see, the top 200 rows. From here I can go into any of these and just edit the data. So here you can see I have edited number 14's address line 1, so it now finishes with the number 2. If I go back to my query, currently address line 1 doesn't have a number 2, but if I execute it, you can see the data has actually been changed in the database. If 200 rows is not sufficient, then you can go to some white space in this editor and go to Pane, SQL, and then change the number 200. So let's say I wanted it to change to number 2000. And then I just need to rerun this code by right and clicking in the top pane and going to execute SQL. So you can see now there are 2000 rows that I can now edit. Alternatively, you can just go to a blank query and just start typing. So I will say select star from, star means all of the columns, and then from I can just drag in the table from the Object Explorer and execute. Now you'll notice that we've got different colors for different types of words. Keywords, for instance, are in blue. Table names and other things like that are in black. If I were to add a where, so where address line 1, and you can see that the computer tries to autocomplete what you are typing, so I'll use the arrow keys and then press tab to accept address line 1. So where address line 1, and I'm going to say contains the letter A, like single apostrophe, percentage a percentage, and close the apostrophe. So that means where address line 1 contains at some point the letter A. If I execute this, the number of rows goes down from 19,614 down to 13,797. But the point of this is that any string literals are shown in red. So you can see where color coding can help to identify keywords like select from where, group by, having, order by, and where you can see string literals. Now sometimes you get really complicated code. Let's say I wanted the top 1000 lines here in person.address as opposed to putting top 1000 at the end. Well, I can do this with another query inside a query. So I can say select top 1000 star from person.address, for instance. Now you notice that I had to do a lot of spaces, but what I can also do is to indent. So indenting is very useful if you want to be able to highlight entire lines and push it away from the edge. So we have got indenting from the left hand side in the toolbar. So this is also useful, for instance, if you're running a loop or you've got a begin try expression or you're using a case. So where you're wanting to test a value against several other values, indenting can be very useful. So I just need to finish this as an alias. So as address alias, let's call that. And now if I execute, it's taking the top 1000 lines from this table and then applying this where. So we won't have 1000 rows in our output. We only have 706 in this case. Once you have created your SQL code, you can save it. Now you can create a view. So I could put right at the beginning, create view, name of view, whatever your name is, as. Alternatively, you can just save it and it's just normal text. And you can do that by going to File, Save, or Save As. And this gives you the opportunity to save it as an SQL file. And then if you wanted to retrieve it later, you can go File, Open, File, and then click on a particular SQL code, and then you can run it whenever you want. So here is the answer to my SQL query. Now this can be quite useful if you don't want to store it in the particular database. For instance, this can be used on multiple databases, or if you want to create a library of your own code, which you can then adapt for later use. Now, when I'm doing this, it's useful to be able to say, if you have a look at line 7, but then you'd have to count from the top all the way down to 7, not the greatest thing, but if you've got a 500 line code, it makes it more difficult. You can add row numbers at the beginning by going to Tools, Options, and this gives you the Options dialog box. So I'm going to expand Text Editor, and I'm going to click on t-sql or Transact-SQL, and here I can enable line numbers by checking on it and clicking OK. I can also enable word wrap as well if I so wished. And here you can see the line numbers. They don't interfere with your code, they're just on the left-hand side. Similarly, in the Tools option box, I can expand the environment node, and we've got things like fonts and colors. So if the particular font you're using is not one that is good for you, you can change it. Now you can also change the size, but another way of changing the size is if you've got a scroll wheel. If I go into this top pane and hold down Control, I can use the scroll wheel to change the size of the text. I can find that quite useful. Maybe my eyes are tired and I just need to focus on the text and make it a bit bigger. Alternatively, maybe I've got a lot written on the page and I want to be able to view more of it at once, so I might want to decrease the text. Now, if there's anything that you are having trouble with, like for instance, what does DESC mean? You can highlight it and press F1. This then opens up a web page. Now, sometimes it will give you the actual help you need and sometimes not. So here it's just a general query editor. But if I type in DESC into this box and scroll down, you'll see eventually I will get to sort in ascending or descending order, which is what this DESC descending is all about. Sometimes you may get more favorable results. If I double click on the word select, here we can see the select statement, and you can then read all about it. Now, sometimes the code that you're using in TSQL is fairly formulaic, yet complex. Well, you might be in luck if I start a new query, if you right and click on some empty query space and go to Insert Snippet. You've also got Cut, Copy and Paste here. So Insert Snippet allows you to get information about the structure of something. Say I wanted a function, so I'll double click on function. Say I wanted a multi-statement table function. So if I double click on that, here you can see the outlines. So we've got create function, the function name, we've got some parameters, we've got what it returns, what's in that, and then we have got the actual function itself. So it allows you to have some of the syntax straight away, so you don't have to go, is it return or returns? Is it return or returns here? You get that straight away. It's worth having a look at. Less worth having a look at, sadly, is the surround with, because there's only a begin, if, and while. So if I click on begin, well, that's fairly easy to create. Right, I'm going to close this window. It says, do you want to save the items? Now you notice that there is a star or asterisk both here at the end of .sql and here in the window. That means that that particular tab has not been saved. So you have done new changes since it was last saved. So I'm not going to save the changes for this. Now you may have a complex query and going, okay, how is this actually going to work? Well, there are two things that can help you. First of all, you can display the estimated execution plan. If I click on that, you can see that it's going to have a look at these two tables, do an index scan and a clustered index scan, filter it down and match it together, and then take a third table and do another hash match together. Now, this can be useful because sometimes it won't be an index scan, it will be a table scan, or it will be an index seek. And if you've got a long-running query, then looking at the estimated execution plan can be useful to go, hang on, maybe you should have an index on these particular columns. Equally, there is an include actual execution plan. Now this doesn't run immediately. However, if I execute this query, you'll see in addition to the results, so this is my data set coming out, my messages, so how many rows are affected by what I've done, and then we've got the actual execution plan. So the first one is the estimated based on indexes. It doesn't actually run the query. This one is the actual, which may vary. Now suppose you have got a view that you have previously created and no longer have access to the original definition. You didn't save it as a .sql file. Well, that's no problem. Let's go into views. So we've got lots of views here that I didn't even create. I can right and click on any of these and I can go to script view. And then I can say I want to create the view, I want to alter the view, I want to create or alter the view, which means create it if it doesn't already exist, alter it if it does, drop, so that's delete, and then drop and recreate. So generally I would use the create or alter to, and I'm going to do this to a new query editor window. So that opens up a new tab, and here is my view. And then if I need to adjust it later, I can do that. I can make any adjustments, say I don't want this particular column, no problem, I will just comment it out. And then I can rerun this and that will update this view. So I can do this to tables. So if I go to a particular table, right and click and go to script table, create to new query editor window, it will look at the table definition and say, okay, if you want this table, maybe you want a second table similarly like it, or maybe you want it in a different database, then this is how you can create it. Now, you should note that what you get back is not necessarily identical to what you have created. So you may have created a default constraint inline in the actual create table statement. Here it is not inline. Similarly, you may not have used all of these brackets, for instance, when creating your table. So it's not going to be identical. And similarly, if I go into programmability and go into stored procedures, and you can see functions here, and right and click on any of those, I can, in addition to going to modify or execute, I can script it. So I will create or alter to new query editor window. And here you can see the script of the procedure. Now this will be as you created it. So you can see we have got comments here, for instance. So up to now, we have been creating queries, but you can also do DBA, database administration, on this. So for example, you can back up and restore databases. So I can right and click on a database and go to tasks. And here we can detach, so we can remove it from this server. We can take it offline so nobody else can actually use it, including yourself. We can back it up and we can restore. Equally, I can right and click on the databases node up here and we can attach and we can restore a database. Additionally, if I right and click on the database and go to tasks, we can import or export data. We can also copy the data as well. So the import data uses a cut down version of SQL Server integration services to do this. You can also look at security. So in a database, you have a security node, and within that you have got users and roles. So you can add database roles, you can add users as well. And within the server, so not the database, but the server, we've also got another security tab, which allows us to have logins and security roles. In the management tab, we have got data collection and extended events and database mail. And we've also got further down the SQL Server agent. So it is used, among other things, by SQL Server integration services. So you can create a package, an automated set of work to extract, transform, and load data. For example, you can also use it to run t-sql code on a schedule. So this is how you can use SQL Server Management Studio, both for creating queries and for DBA. If you would like more help about how to use SQL Server, then why not have a look at my website, idodata.com, where we've got lots of courses on creating your own queries and on database administration and more. On the featured video coming up, we will look at how to install SQL Server Developer on your own computer for free, together with SQL Server Management Studio, which you have seen in this video. If you want to see this video, please click on it. I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. Please like, subscribe and click that bell. Thank you very much for watching and keep learning.